Welcome to this edition of Weather to Watch. It is Tuesday, the 28th of January, 2025. Well, here's the weather worth watching. We've got that cutoff low, which pretty much dominates the significant weather for the rest of the work week. There's going to be an extended heavy rain potential area out ahead of that low. Some severe weather. It doesn't look like it's going to get too out of hand, but there are some areas to watch. It's still a weather pattern that has a warmer trend in general. And the question is, where is winter? It's really kind of disappeared to one corner of the country, but there are some signs it may be coming back to certain sections of the country by early next week. We'll start out by looking at the infrared satellite loop for the lower 48. And if you've been watching the weather for a while, you'll recognize that this particular feature here is often seen out ahead of a developing low pressure system. And that's certainly exactly what's happening. So this is upper level clouds for the most part, but it does represent a kind of a tapping in of moisture. The low is right there. And in fact, all we have to do is go to the next slide and I'll show you the 500 millibar low right there parked. It looks like actually just off to the east of Las Vegas at this hour. And so this, as the circulation around that is going like this, and that's what helps to pump up and feed humidity and moisture into the lower 48. Let's take a look around the lower 48 and also parts of southern Canada on the surface, see what's going on. Well, the first thing that attracts my attention is up here in the northeast. We have a cool front that's draped through southern parts of Pennsylvania, just south of New York City, just kind of cutting New Jersey in half there. Temperatures behind that are fairly cool with single-digit readings in upstate New York. Burlington, Vermont is sitting at 8 degrees right now. So, yeah, that's where winter's hanging out for sure. And we'll continue to do so here for the next couple of days. This is a clipper system here, this low that's centered just off the northeast of Duluth. And later on, I'll show you where the surface low tracks are forecast to develop. And this is right on schedule where it's supposed to be as we continue to see a series of lows that kind of travel like that, draping cool fronts into the U.S., but not very deeply into the U.S., only into the northern part of the country, not even maybe through even Iowa. More into the Great Lakes states, really. So that's what's going on there. That's a common pattern. Much of the west is under high pressure, cool and dry conditions, plateau conditions, to the point where the air is actually too still and too calm out through Oregon. Lots of morning fog and stagnation problems there. This high in the southern U.S. is modified, so it's not as cold as some of the highs that have gotten down here recently, with temperatures in the coastal areas of Texas and Louisiana approaching 60 degrees. And also 40s and 50s out here through the high plains. And that's going to actually increase in temperature as that low that we talked about in the upper atmosphere begins to tap in and bring some of that warmer air back up to the north. Well, like I said, if you look at the low pressure tracks, all this is a kind of a combination of different models' opinions about where the centers of lows will be. But very clear here that there's two things going on, but the primary low track is going to be up here through the northern Great Lakes and into New England for the next couple of days. Meanwhile, that upper level low will lead to a surface low, but there's a pretty big spread of difference from southern Iowa all the way down almost to Texas on where that low will be. And the reason for that is because the low at the surface is not real well defined, at least not through Thursday. It might get a little bit better defined after that. But weather does tend to follow these pressure systems. Not always, but it does on many occasions. Well, here's a look at the 500 millibar flow. You can call this steering currents. It's a really good approximation of where the jet stream winds are located. It finds and defines the little disturbances, the difference between where the Arctic air is and the mild air. It also finds cutoff lows. And that's what we've been talking about going into today. And for the rest of the week, it's going to be this feature right here, this cutoff low right on the Arizona and California border that's going to be moving. And so we'll do that. We'll just kind of inch this forward a little bit with time. Notice how it kind of spins. I referred to this as a bowling ball a couple of days ago, and it kind of resembles that. It's just kind of rolling, not in any particular hurry. It's in New Mexico here. This is late on Wednesday evening. Here's Thursday morning, still kind of rolling into the plains, changing shape a little bit, but that's a pretty strong jet stream. And what's going to allow to happen is a pretty a pretty good influx of moisture. And when I say moisture, people are wondering, what is moisture? In this case, I mean dew points or humidity, the ability for the atmosphere to work with and produce probably some pretty good rains. And we'll detail that. And that jet streak becomes pretty pronounced over portions of western Arkansas. That's valid late on Thursday night. And then eventually it gets caught up in the flow, and over Illinois, it stops being a cutoff low and eventually gets caught up in the flow. So if I just kind of toggle that back and forth, that's going to be the main weather maker here over the next couple of days for sure. With cold air, I'm going to stop this here on Wednesday. I just wanted to point out here that the cold air is behind the jet stream. So this is where all the cold stuff is. In New England, and they're going to get a few bouts of snow. I'll show you in a minute. The low pressure track or the storm track is definitely in that part of the world. And so that's where winter is hanging out, basically. And then one more thing we'll do is just kind of take this out. This, by the way, is the EPS. This is an ensemble of the European models. So it's many different opinions with a slight change in how the computer models are initiated. So it's kind of like an average, I guess you could say. And right in here, look at this ridge of high pressure that builds. This is Monday evening, and this is pretty good. So this is basically represents a warm air, and I'll show you the Denver forecast here in a little bit. And then once we get beyond that into early next week, and we're talking about the 5th. Here's the 6th right in here. We have a little agreement here that there's troughing in the west. And maybe right in here, that could be supportive of some winter precipitation, some snow, but it's way too early to be able to say with any kind of confidence that that will happen. So here's the heavy rain forecast, and we're looking at where the purples start here. That's actually 1.5 inches. So all this area here going all the way up into southern Missouri, covering a large part of northern Texas, including the Dallas area. And then we have these areas of 3-inch totals, or maybe even a 4-inch bullseye there around McAllister in Oklahoma. And Fort Smith, Arkansas, and maybe over to Little Rock as well. That's Thursday and Friday, so that's a 2-day precipitation. It will rain a little bit before that, but that's when the bulk of it, I think, will actually fall. And is it needed? Well, here's the drought monitor that was issued on January 21st. I live in Springfield, by the way, so yeah, it's been a little dry here, especially northwest of town. That rain will help to alleviate that somewhat. Where the bullseye of rain, though, is, no, and they've been okay. And areas that could use some rainfall down in southwest and South Texas, deep South Texas, are going to get some, but they're not going to get the maximum amount, which is good. It's always a pendulum with weather, so you don't want to get too much at once. So maybe the little rain they get there will just kind of knock that drought down in baby steps, the way we'd like it to happen. There's still a severe weather threat tomorrow, Wednesday, for central and north central Texas. This is the lowest ranking, so this is a marginal risk of severe thunderstorms. I'm guessing it's mostly going to be straight line winds with with the line storms that forms with that on Wednesday. And then if we look at this shifts Thursday. This is a little bit of a progression more to the east than was originally forecast. So this cutoff low is getting a little more progressive, so it's speeding up a little bit, whereas it's starting out kind of like a slow rolling bowling ball, but it is kind of getting caught up on the flow. So the severe weather threat does shift to the second highest rating, and that basically covers the central portion of Louisiana from Houston to Lake Charles to Shreveport, and maybe even as far to the east as parts of Mississippi. That would be the following day on Thursday. Look at the high temperature forecast. Now, this is actually valid on Monday. Remember, I was talking about that ridge of high pressure. So I'm just going to take a look at Denver real quick. You notice the hottest temperature is down there in Texas, and the coldest reading is in northern Montana. So we do have sort of a definite jet stream boundary right through here, but that ridge is building in through there, and that's what's producing these really warm temperatures, 50s and 60s out through the Rockies. So here's the GFS forecast for Stapleton Airport at Denver. So they're kind of hovering around mostly in the 40s for the next couple of days, but by Monday, with that ridge building, they shoot up to 59. Then that backdoor Arctic front kind of slips in from the northeast, and then they go back up to 59. So they got kind of a seesaw. Now, I want you to notice what happens to the temperatures here, and that's that jet stream change I was talking about that may support a snow from basically starting around that part of Colorado and moving on to the plains. But that's a stretch. That's more than a week away, so we'll take this one day at a time. And speaking of snow, And speaking of snow, the lower 48 now at 31% snow cover. That storm from many weeks ago still has snow on the ground in northeast parts of Kansas. That does it for this edition of Weather to Watch. Please like and subscribe the video. These come out about every other day or so. Thanks for watching this episode, and we'll see you next time.